How can military leadership principles transform your approach to delegation and team success in a good way? In this episode, Scott McCarthy reveals how his experience in the military shaped his mindset for leading through transitions and creating lasting impact. Learn why delegation is a daily practice, how to shed the ego, and how to build leadership habits that strengthen teams and drive lasting results.
Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world.
Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen. Welcome to today's episode of Rise to Lead. I am pumped to introduce Scott McCarthy from Kingston, Ontario in Canada. He is a Chief Leadership Officer at Moving Forward Leadership. Welcome to the Rise to Lead show, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's so awesome to be here. I'm so pumped that you're pumped.
Absolutely. I'm so curious because we just met. So yeah. I'm totally curious. Curiosity is my top leadership trait.
Oh, that's a great one to have.
Okay. Scott McCarthy's leadership journey ignited early as a young visionary eager to direct and strategize in the Canadian Army. A firm believer in the universality, difficult word, in the universality of leadership skills, Scott advocates for delegation as a key to organizational success and teamwork as the heart of high performance. His philosophy is clear. Leaders must create a lasting legacy that endures beyond their tenure. Now, as a senior Canadian Army officer and Chief Leadership Officer at Moving Forward Leadership, Scott continues to inspire through his podcast, sharing wisdom from his military experience. His message is a clarion call to all aspiring leaders to embrace their potential, lead with purpose, and craft a legacy that stands the test of time. Whoa.
I know, like you listen. It's weird to listen to your own bio written by you, but said by someone else. I'm just like, is that me? Really? Wow. Right. Yeah, it is me.
Okay. Yes, it sounds great. So, in a few sentences, Scott, tell us what led you to join the Army. It's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and many of us would probably prefer to live in a world where we don't need armies anymore. Right.
Right. That's interesting. That probably could be a podcast episode in its own. But I'll tell you, I decided I was joining the Army at grade 9. And the funny, ironic part of it was I wanted to join the Army. So I grew up in the far eastern part of Canada. I mean, like an hour from the most easterly point in North America. And I was like, everyone goes to the local university there. They go to what's called Memorial University Newfoundland. And I was just like, we got a presentation from the Canadian Forces about the Royal Military College, which is equivalent to the US West Point. And I'm like, I'm going there because I want to be different. Lo and behold, I showed up. We were all the same. We were all dressed up identical. We all had the same haircuts. We all had the same schedule, but I was still being different. Dang it. So that was kind of the start of the journey of my Army life, which still continues today. So today, 23 years later, after missing my high school graduation to enroll in the Army, Uh, 23 years later, I'm now the commanding officer, what we refer to as the commanding officer. So in civilian terms, think of me as a CEO of the country's largest supply depot. So I command 180 people. We manage $4.2 billion worth of assets at the supply depot and support Canadian Forces operations both home and across the world. So that's who I am. That's a very short, condensed version of your question.
Okay. And excuse my strange face before, but I had a sudden urge to cough, and I don't know what it was, something in the air. That
Life happens.
nowadays there's always something strange in the air, so no wonder. Okay. So yeah, a great story. Yes. So you went to a place where people wear uniforms to be different. It's funny, right?
Yeah, that's the irony, right?
But as I can see, you still manage to be different and to become a leader. So that's awesome. Now, I read somewhere in what you submitted to me in your application for this podcast, I read leadership, it's a cycle. And that intrigued me. So explain to us what you mean by that. Leadership is a cycle.
So that comes directly out of my military experience. So if you think about the military, and my current job is great, right? So the message I've been telling my team is I'm like, hey folks, this is your unit. It's not my unit. And which gets people really confused right away because the commanding officer who's responsible for everything in the unit is telling everyone else that it's not theirs, but rather it's, the people's unit per se, which is very different from a military context, right? You think about military commanders, they're the ones in charge, leading the rush, yada, 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 right? So why do I say that? I say that because if you pull up a calendar, I can tell you when I'm leaving. I can tell you July 2026. We can probably pick the day right now. That's when the next person's going to take over, and I'm going to move on to another job. So, roughly every 2 years, sometimes one, sometimes three, but roughly every 2 years, we change jobs in the Canadian Army. And this is actually common with many militaries. So, this is where the whole idea of leadership, it's a cycle, kind of gets developed from because every 2 years, I'm going through the same type of cycle. And that is take job, get comfortable in job, execute in job, prepare to hand off job, and leave. Well, when you reflect on that, that is actually true for any leader. No leader actually stays in their role indefinitely, right? Like we're all going to leave. And it's actually the reason why I never called moving forward leadership Scott McCarthy leadership or something to that effect. Because if I want to make a longer lasting legacy, much as what's in my bio, I need to set the conditions so that I can hand it off to someone else someday. And if it's my name, well, my name comes with me. I'm sorry. So then it won't be Scott McCarthy leadership. It'll be maybe Ethan McCarthy, my oldest son's leadership. I don't know, but it'll be somebody's, right? So that's a whole idea about it being a cycle. And there's different stages we go through to make sure that cycle is effective. How's that sound?
It sounds great. And actually, it reminds me almost of any job, right? And then moving forward is so important because we definitely don't want to go backward. And sometimes it might seem a little bit like we go backward, but it's really
100%.
not happening that way because now we have learned something different. We have grown as people, and we have different types of not just knowledge but wisdom, which I
Right.
believe is actually more important.
Absolutely.
It's that.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I say to the team is like, hey, the changes that I do in my tenure here for the next 2 years, 2+ years, have to outlast me. They cannot reside within Scott McCarthy as the commanding officer. It can't. Why? Because the moment I leave that day in July, all these changes will go with me.
Mhm.
right? So we have a number of different issues, and when I look at the issues per se, it's all personality based. Is one person willing to accept the risk of this, and is the other person willing to accept not willing to accept that risk, right? So the team gets yo-yoed every 2 years because suddenly one person shows up and they're willing to do something, they leave, the next person shows up, they're not willing to do something, so the team's like, well, what are we doing here? So we need to make changes. And I said to the team, yeah, we're investigating how to get what you would like, but at the same time, we need to do it so that it is able to withstand and last after me. Hence that lasting bit within my bio. And that it refers to the cycle. So if you spend all this time, whether that's 2 years, 20 years, right, your entire life in a leadership role, and you're prepared to leave and move on, to the next stage of life, whether that be a new job, whether that be retirement, right, what have you, you have to set things up so that the moment you leave, things still continue. That's how you make lasting change and impact in your leadership and your leadership journey. It's not because you're there. The fact that the real true test is if you're not there and it still carries on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hear this so often from my clients, from my coaching clients who say, well, my manager left and everything changed. And now I'm completely disoriented because I don't know anymore. We were in the middle of this project or in the middle of this conversation regarding my career, and now it's
Right.
all no longer relevant. And I have to
Right.
start over and start from scratch, and it hasn't been passed on. This is the other thing, right? And
Exactly. So there's two sides to this issue, and this is super
Mhm.
common issue, right? As you hinted at, it's super common. Happens to managers, happens to team members all the time. Like as we said, like leadership's a cycle. You're gonna leave someday. So in this case, the more senior manager left. So when you leave, like you need to prepare that handover. And this is one of the things that we do in the military, and we do it quite well, is that we hand over our roles to the next incoming person. So we bring them through the job, what needs to actually get done. We tell them, the ins and outs and the details of our team members, and show them the resources, to show them around, and we take time. So for my takeover, it was a week-long affair, right? Like a week of just constant meetings, getting toured around, and then learning the ins and outs. So part of the handover process, and don't get me wrong, sometimes it's just not possible, right?
Mhm.
But so if that's not going to be possible, how do you do it? You make sure you keep detailed notes about your team members and your projects, right? And make sure that this stuff is accessible moving forward to the next person. And if you truly care about your team members, you would make sure that you enabled, all right, the person coming behind you to take all this information in. So that's one side of the equation here. The other side of the equation is something else we see way too often. Someone new shows up to a job and suddenly everything changes, right? Wrong. It is so wrong, right? You need at least 90 days, minimum 3 months to understand. So the first thing I did when I got in this job, I said, hey, team, so just to let you know, and I refer to this as the sit portion of the cycle. I'm gonna sit, and they kind of went, excuse me. I'm like, I'm gonna make absolutely no decisions, no changes for the next 3 months, and I dropped a date on the calendar, and it was late July. I said because I took over in May, so we had May, June, and basically July, 3 months. I said, right there, right before I go on holidays, there's going to be no decisions made, and the ones I make at that time, the changes we make at that time are going to be very minor, just to help give you guys time to get things rolling and get things set up and stuff like this. And it was a very weird feeling for the team because they're used to leaders showing up and suddenly like, oh, I don't like that. I want it this way. I don't like that. I want it that way. This is wrong. But the problem with that is you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know why things are the way they are. You don't know the history behind it. You don't know the impacts that by making a change will have. You don't know the impacts of the impacts. You don't know anything.
Right.
Yet so many leaders come in and they start like slamming down, breaking down walls, doing whatever, repainting, and just because they want it their way. But it's actually, there's a study, I forget the study's name now, but it's like actually scientifically proven this is completely the wrong methodology. You need 3 months. You need to understand. And that's the kind of, and this is why your client there feels this way, like, oh, everything is changing. The new manager that showed up, the first thing should have been reassure. You need to reassure your team, because change is one of the most stressful things in someone's life. If you look at the biggest stresses or stressors in people's lives, buying a house, getting married, having a baby, job change. Those are the four. And within job change, having a supervisor change out is part of that. Whether you're changing your job or your supervisor is changing, maybe a new ownership comes in, right, of a company. So you need to remove that stressor. And the easiest way to do that is by simply, hey, folks, we're going to maintain the status quo. And guess what? They're the experts and you're not. You're the new guy. It's now November. We're recording. I still refer to myself as the new guy at work. I am the new guy walking around because I'm still learning on a daily basis. And if you have the attitude as a leader, you're going to learn the ins and outs of your business so that you can make positive change, not negative change.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that. You're the new guy, because I was going to say that. Exactly. And I know you implicitly said it before already. So yes, I wanted to just pick up on a few things that you said, that I made a note of here. So yes, so you said you sit and listen to remove the stressors, because of course, as we know, there's a lot of uncertainty in change, and that's what causes the stress, right? When we don't know
100%.
what's going to happen next, we are maybe afraid of something, we are insecure about what it's going to look like when this new person comes, and maybe they just turn everything upside down, which is what a lot of people do, and which you do not do in your approach. So that is definitely a surprise factor, probably, for a lot of people. I can see that.
Yeah, some people's mouths, I think they're still on the floor and they're trying to lift them back up, right? And they're like, but let me tell you this though, it's paid dividends, because the changes I'm making now are going to last beyond me, right?
Right.
Now, is every single one of them going to last beyond me? Probably not. Let's be realistic here. But the ones I'm making are going to last beyond me. Why? Because I actually fully understand. And I can speak, when I speak to my superior, I can intelligently tell him, hey, this is the reason. And I'll give you a quick example. There was a project that was done, and I won't go into the details, but it was garbage out of the gate. And I spent 3 months just looking into it and trying to understand all the different angles. And finally, a month ago, I approached my boss and said, I want to put a bullet in this, which was a surprise to many people. And he was like, okay. And I outlined the reasons. I'm like, one, it's not going to help us operationally. Two, it's actually going to be more of a hindrance. Three, it actually limits our ability to move forward down the overall arching project that we want to achieve down the line. And I explained it all to him. Why was I able to do that? Because I actually sat back and listened. I listened to the team. I took in, information from the stakeholders. But if I'm like, let's go, like, I would have said, boss, we need to kill this. He'd be like, why? I'd be like, because we need to kill this. And he'd be like, but why? Because I don't like it. And then he'd be like, no, no, sorry, that's not going to work. And then suddenly the trust factor for him gets eroded a little bit because, well, Scott doesn't do his homework. He's just a cowboy. He's just riding off, whatever he feels like. Right. So suddenly now it becomes even more difficult for me to be able to approach him with ideas, try to get permission, authority, money, resources, what have you. So by taking my time, actually analyzing it, building an actual solid, comprehensive argument why we need to get rid of it, is actually help the team move forward. And on top of that, I'm like, hey, we need to get rid of it, but here's my plan. Right. And we're going to do this instead. And he was like, all right, let's go. I'm like, great. And now I need you to put it in writing for me. And now this is the lasting change bit, right? I'm like, I need you to put it in writing for me. And he kind of went, and he actually understood pretty quickly, but I'll explain why. Why? Because it goes back to what I said earlier, July 2026. I'm gone. So I need my superior to task me with an initiative that I came up with so that it lasts beyond my tender.
Right. Totally plausible, totally plausible. And I want to also pick up on something you said. You needed that buy-in from your superior, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also gave you the buy-in from your team that you did that.
100%.
So it goes in
100%.
all directions and it comes from all directions, right? Now, I also wanted to give a quick, so you mentioned those life changes, that the typical ones. So for me, those have been more around relocation, right? And location
Right.
changes. So I can definitely also relate to it in that way. And I must say, I must be somebody who thrives in change, although it's also not always comfortable and it is sometimes stressful at the same time as well, because sometimes I just didn't think about it so much before doing it. But when you're in the middle of it, you just realize, oh, there are these stress factors, and now I have to deal with them. So absolutely true. And another example that I wanted to mention about not doing the handover that I personally experienced, Scott, is I was working with this big financial institution, and we were working with somebody who was in a pretty high position on a project for a team of about 12 women in that case. And I was preparing stuff and we were working on this, and he failed to tell me that he was going to leave. And he told
Oh,
nobody else who came after him about this project. So it wasn't just that I lost this project as a service provider, as a coach, but also the entire team of women lost the opportunity of this program, right? So yes, it's wow. I think a lot of people can tell a lot of stories of that handover not happening. So thanks for bringing
yeah,
that up.
absolutely.
Okay, there were so many interesting topics in what you submitted to me, so I had to choose some. And one topic that I personally feel very, very passionate about is successful delegation strategies. So let's
Oh,
talk
yes.
about delegation. You said delegation should be used as a leadership force multiplier.
Right.
Talk to us
So,
about
force multiplier is a very army-centric term, which
it. Yeah.
I brought across the table, across the way. So let's talk about what a force multiplier is. So when we talk about army speak, what a force multiplier is, it's basically having an asset which enables us to project combat power at a much higher level. So, for example, we bring in helicopters, they increase our force multiplier higher, right? It just enables us to be able to do more, achieve more with basically less resources. Do more with less, as we all say. So that's what a force multiplier actually is. So when we look at it from a delegation standpoint, that's what we mean is you're going to enable your team to be able to achieve so much more through the use of successful delegation. And it is so like so many people are so hesitant about delegation. I still see this now. I'm trying to get my team like really on board with it because a lot of people hold on like, oh, it's not going to get done right if I don't do it. It's I have to be the one. It's on my shoulders. Okay, right, fair enough on the last part, not necessarily for the first part. So in order to kind of set people at ease, let's first talk about what delegation is, why it's important, and we'll kind of go through the steps of how we kind of do it from my standpoint. So the first thing is for people to understand, everyone, when we talk about delegation, everyone thinks of this big thing. Oh, we're given this big task, we're going to sit someone down for an hour, and we're going to do we're going to like explain the project to them and tell them what they're responsible for, yada yada yada. I'm like, no, actually that's totally wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not saying what I'm saying is that that's not the only form of delegation. The reality
Yeah.
is we
Depends. Yeah.
delegate all the time. All the time. We're delegating right now, Regina. We're delegating. We're delegating to Zoom to enable us to have this connection so that we can, record this podcast episode. You may delegate to if you have children, you say, hey, I need you to do the dishes. That's a form of delegation. Hey, honey, pick up some bread and milk on the way home from school today or from work today. Sorry. That's another form of delegation. There are so many forms of delegation. We actually don't realize we're constantly delegating. by asking others to do things for us. And if we look at it from that lens, it's not so scary anymore, right?
Just
So,
as we are constantly negotiating, I might add.
yeah, that too, right? Right.
It's part
That's
of
awesome.
delegation too.
So when we think of it from a business standpoint, there might be delegation in tasks, there could be even projects, it might be management roles, it might be delegation of organizational structure, i.e., you're taking a whole new team, okay? But the core thing of delegation, the reason why we do it is to enable others to make decisions. Give them the ability to make decisions, that decision making authority, so that they can move their piece of the pie forward. Okay. And why is this now important? It's important because it enables you as the leader to do your job. Your job is not to be thinking all the time down and in, but rather up and out at this more strategic level. Okay. So where do our next clients come from? How do I influence the board to give us the funding for this project? Right? These are different ways that you could be thinking. And if you're at another level, maybe you're middle management. So like, hey, how do I influence my supervisor to enable us to do flex work, perhaps, or work from home agreement? Get another person, enable a salary increase for this rockstar employee, maybe get them recognized. Like, this is where you need to be thinking. So strategic thinking, occurs at every level. It's just a little bit different, but it enables you to do that and do your job. It enables quicker execution turnaround. I'll tell you a quick story.
Mhm.
I was coaching a business owner, entrepreneur. And by the way, entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur listening, you're the number one person that has the hardest time with delegation. Why? Because you grew your business from the ground up. It's your baby. You know it like no one else. But the problem is, you gotta let it go and enable others to take a piece of that baby and move it forward. So I was working with this entrepreneur, and he was going to a conference, and he was very focused, right? So very intentional, which was awesome. One of the things I loved about him. So like, he'd go to a conference, he'd shut his phone off. No phone calls, no emails, no texts for the day. Amazing. Well, they were working on a big request for a proposal. So as he's at the conference, guess what happens? Of course, um, a change for the request for proposal comes in, and his team gets it, and they're like, well, the company that had the request for proposal needed some more information about what they were proposing, and it was going to change the pricing structure, but he had delegated no authority to anybody to make those changes, to give the pricing, to enable this file to move forward. So what happened, of course, he missed it. They missed the deadline. They lost the request for proposal. And we're walking through this, and we're talking about it. I said, well, why didn't you enable something? He's like, well, Scott, my team isn't good at sales yet. Like, I'm a salesperson. My sales is my background is sales. They wouldn't have got as good a deal if I didn't do it. I'm like, right, but you have no deal right now because
Exactly.
you didn't able. So this is the first step. The first step of delegation is this three-letter word that you need to destroy in your leadership journey, and that three-letter word is spelled ego. Ego. Your ego is what's destroying your ability to delegate. Your thoughts that you can do it better than anybody else, that you know it more than anybody else, is your ego, which is holding you up, much like this business owner who said, well, I'm the best salesperson of the company. That may be true, but the reality is, because of it, you have no sale now. Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
You
And oftentimes it's actually also not necessarily that we do it all better, but differently.
Well,
And
and that was my next step. As we
okay.
get later, it's that the reality is that there are people out there who do better things than you do.
Mhm.
Like, I enable my team. Like, we have this software that we use that's internal to the department. It's called Drimus. I'm like, guys, I can't even spell it, let alone use it. If we need to do stuff in Drimus, like, you guys are going to take care of this for me. Like, you do not want me touching it. I will mess it up, right? But again, if I had ego, I'm like, oh, I'm the best at everything. I could do this. Like, just give me the access. I'll do it. Yeah, the whole system will crash, right? But but
Yeah.
that's the point, is that so many leaders out there think they're the best at everything. But the reality is that you can't be the best at everything.
Right.
What you
And it's
need to
not
be the
meant to
best
be either.
at, what you need to be the best at is decision making. You
Mhm.
need to be the best decision maker. right? And now that would be like, well, that means that all decisions need to come to me. Heck no. Like, you need to, and we're going to get into this now, enable your team to make decisions so that you can go back to that strategic level planning thought process, right? So how do we do that? We prepare our team. The first thing we do and prepare our team is understanding intent. All right, this is a big word we use in the military a lot. Commander's intent. What is the boss trying to achieve? Coupled with that is what we refer to as the desired end state. When we're done, where do we want to be? These two things enable people the understanding of where we're going to go. So what do I want to achieve? Where do we want to end up? And this can be useful for anybody. Useful for projects, where do we want to be at the end of our project? All right. With what? When do we want to be there? Okay. How? Okay. You only give them, all right, the desired end state. You say, this is where, maybe the when you give them, if there's certain timelines you have to respect. But outside of that, the how, you leave them the how. You leave your team how to do it. Go figure it out. Okay. You hit the desired end state. The next thing is we give them what we call arcs of fire. So again, military speak, that's basically where which range can you use your weapons. So what do we mean by that in delegation speaks is like, hey, this is inside the lane for you. You have the authority to do this, that, and that. You do not have the authority to do this, that, or the other thing. So a few examples is maybe you have the authority to spend up to $1 million. Anything above $1 million has to come to me. You have the authority to use 6 team members. You want more, you have to come to me. Okay, timelines is another form of an arc, and so on, all right? Maybe it's like, hey, you got this team, but you can only work Wednesdays with the team. Okay. The final piece in preparing your team is what we refer to in the military as Commander's Critical Information Requirements, CCIRs. This is like the 3 a.m. phone call, like, boss, problem. So if these things occur, you tell me immediately. Okay? So when we add these things together, what we're doing is we're actually establishing a sense of psychological safety with our team, because now they understand what's their role, what's not their role, where they can play, where they can't play. And suddenly it goes, all right, well, I got this. Okay, I know where we're going. I know what you want. I know when you want it by. I get to pick how we get there. Amazing. Love it. Empowering your team members. And I know what's onside and offside, right? And good old hockey speak. So now they go off. Now you go and you set the conditions for their success. All right. And you go, all right, how do you feel about this? You good? Not good? Yeah, I'm good, but I'm lacking in this. Like, okay, let's get you some training. Let's get you some development. Let's prepare you to take this on. And maybe that's courses. Maybe like, I've never touched MS Project before. Okay, cool. Online course. Here you go. $200. Done. No big deal. We have a SME down the hallway there. You can talk to Philip. Take care of him. He'll take care of you. I'll make sure I free up his schedule for the next week, and he can, help mentor you. Whatever that might be. Okay. The next step in setting conditions for their success is continued support and access. You have to enable your team to be able to come back to you. They'll have questions later, guaranteed. But what you have to enable is, keep that door open for them. You say, hey, you got any questions? Come by. Now, the biggest problem with this is that often people misinterpret this part is, if I come with questions, that means the supervisor, my boss, thinks that I don't know what I'm doing, therefore I'm not as able to do the job, right? And the reality is you have to, again, set the conditions so that's not actually true. Like tell them, consistently tell them, like, listen, judgment doesn't come from not knowing what to do. Judgment comes from knowing that you don't know what to do and you do nothing about it, right? So if you need to come and bounce ideas from me, come and bounce ideas off of me.
Right. Clear communication is key in all of these steps, right?
Right, but it's even more than communication. It's that psychological safety, and like, hey, no matter what, my boss isn't judging me, but rather is being another resource for me to tap into.
Right. Okay. So the trust though must be built before you even start the process. because
This
it's
whole
hard to
process
build
is
it
going
just
to
right now,
right.
suddenly, right? So
Absolutely.
it's the fundament of everything that you want to be successful really in your team. But please go ahead.
100%. So as you go through this process, you're actually,
Mhm.
it's part of building trust.
Mhm.
I often say trust is the cornerstone of leadership. So you as the leader have to give trust, but you have to earn trust. So you have
Mhm.
to trust your team implicitly right away. And people are like, why? That's crazy. I'm like, well, if you don't trust them, why do you have them? I
Yeah.
always hated that whole thing. Oh, my trust is hard to earn. Well, congratulations. You're a de-enabler, not an enabler. So so yes, trust is absolutely crucial, but trust gets built through the whole process. And actually,
Mhm.
the next part is even going to double down on the trust part because you have to have their six throughout this whole process. So if they make a decision, and if you don't necessarily agree with it, you cannot go in and stomp and go, no, that isn't, that's wrong. Like, no, you gave them your intent, you gave them the end state you wanted, you enabled them with the arcs and the information requirement. The rest of it's on them. If you don't agree with something 100%, that's still on them. Like, you have to support them. They have to know you're supported because if they don't feel supported, i.e., don't trust, this whole thing falls apart. And this is both from your perspective as well. Maybe someone up higher doesn't agree with something that they've done. Like, well, boss, you know what? Just wait it out. I got this. This is or if they're super mad, you're like, it's on me. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. But you still have their six. You support them. Okay. And then as you move through the whole process, maybe this is a project that's long term. Maybe it's a 6-month project, for example. You have what schedule updates, right? You meet with them on a regular basis. Okay, where are we at? All right, we're here, because and then you're able to help guide, like, oh, maybe we need to tweak this, maybe we tweak that. Did you think of this? Did you think of that? Did think about what the effect of the next financial, next election is going to have on us, what have you, right? And you enable them to adjust as we go, because the old analogy story goes, a plane takes off from New York, goes to Lyon, France, and the pilot never checks his course until about 4 hours into the flight. Well, it's going to be, 500 miles off course, but rather is as the pilot flies from New York to France, they're making minor adjustments throughout. That could be due to crosswinds, that could be due to a backwind, that could be due to suddenly, tapping the stick accidentally, what have you, right? So you want to
Mhm.
make those minor adjustments. And then the final piece of my delegation framework is celebrate the wins, but learn from the failures, right? Your people are the reason you win. You are the reason you fail. All right. Your people are the reason you win. You are the reason why they fail. So if the project is a failure, it's either you failed to do something, forgot to give them your intent clear enough. Maybe the end state wasn't good enough. Maybe you didn't provide them good enough arcs of fire. You weren't open enough with with the feedback sessions, what have you. Perhaps it was training development. Who knows? But if you look back on it, I have this philosophy of like extreme leadership where that is essentially the core. Now, you have to celebrate the wins, celebrate the milestones, right? And
Mhm.
it's interesting. Back to my team, we have biweekly meetings with all the key people, and one of the first things I tell my team to do is like, "Hey, what's your win of the past 2 weeks?" Which is a really odd thing for a military organization to do
Yeah.
because we're so focused on what the negatives is, and that's a person thing. But what I'm trying to do is reinforce success, right? So we focus on those wins. And then we finally reflect on the failures. Like, okay, what went wrong? And we use a very simple tool to do that. And it's called what we refer to as the after action review or AAR process. What happened from everybody's perspective? Okay, not my perspective, but everybody's perspective, because everyone saw the issue at a different angle,
Right.
right? So what happened? What went wrong? And then what went right? And how might we, mitigate it so it doesn't happen, the wrong stuff happen again? Okay. And I would add on as well, how might we double down on what went right? So you're looking at the situation as a whole from all angles. You're looking at the things that went wrong. You want to figure out how to fix it. And then on top of that, you're looking at things that went right and how might you use that going forward. And that is basically the delegation framework that I use. I use this with my team all the time. Um, And they know, and it frees me up. It frees me up to think more strategic, go after more strategic level things that, is going to push my organization forward into the future. And at the same time, like, I don't worry about things like day-to-day operations. My operations officer's got that handled. I do not need to know. She knows to come to me if certain things are triggered, if there's certain things that, need information needs to go up higher, what have you. But like day to day, I do not need to know. I just don't need to know. I don't care. Like, honestly, don't care, because I know it's handled, and that's all because I've delegated it effectively.
Mhm. Yes, I sometimes call that also delegation with growth in mind. It's your own growth and your team's growth.
Yeah, 100% for sure. And that's a great point. What are the positives out of this? I've talked a lot about freeing you up, but as well as it's the growth for the team members, both the one you're directly delegating, as well as the ones that are working with them, perhaps. Okay, it's their growth. They're getting more experience. They're making more decisions. They're feeling enabled, feeling seen, heard, respected. Oh, why do people leave organizations? Why? Because they feel like they're not seen, heard, respected, right?
Yep.
Oh, how many
Most
organizations
of the
out there
time,
right
yes.
now are struggling with personnel issues and vacancies, right? Like, people are leaving in droves. The Great Resignation hit us hard, and still many organizations are still feeling that effect. Well, like, simply delegation. This is why it's a force multiplier, because there's so many aspects that it affects.
Right. And it does free up time for yourself too. Nice side effect, I would say.
Well, frees up time only for you to fill it with other stuff.
Fill
But
it
it's the
with
more
your strategy work, maybe, but a lot of also my clients, leader clients, do feel they are overworked and they do want to also free up some time for themselves. So yes, why not also use it for that? You can use it, of course, as you just said, and that often happens to fill it with other very important tasks, and especially the strategic management and leadership. However, there's also this other aspect, and I think it's also an important one to mention,
absolutely.
because it's also about our well-being
Oh,
as leaders.
100%.
Because if you're not a thriving leader, then your team will also suffer from that, right? And everybody around you will. So this is amazing, Scott. Really awesome framework. Love it, love it, love it. Yes, I know delegation is a big topic, and you have laid it out so beautifully for us and so clearly. So I really appreciate that. I think all our listeners will as well. Now, is there anything else that you would like to add at this point that I haven't asked
Oof.
you, or that you haven't? I mean, I know there's a lot. We could talk for years.
So maybe I'll just quickly double down on what you just said, and the well-being. So when on my podcast, in my content, I refer to three domains of leadership. The second one everyone gets right away, and that's leading your team. That is the individuals within the team, the Janes, the Joes, the Sallys, the Susans, the whoever's, right? How do you meld them together, become a high-performing team? How do you take care of them? How do you enable them? We just talked a lot about leading your team through the whole delegation bit. We hinted at number three, which is leading your organization. So, enabling that strategic, mindset, enabling those strategic goals, strategy, planning, culture are all things that we talk about when we talk about leading your organization, i.e., the institution that you're with. But you hinted at domain number one, and I'll just quickly jump on that. And domain number one is actually leading yourself, the leader,
Yeah.
right? And the
All
one
leadership
word,
starts with self. I totally agree with you. It all starts with that. My first leadership framework was mostly about that, actually. So, yes, I totally agree with you. I just had to quickly say that, but go on.
so there's so many aspects to that, right? Uh, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your professional development, uh, and going forward. And I'm just quickly, as I'm talking here, bringing up another framework which we use. It's five. It's 8 different things which high-performing leaders do. Okay. It's from the military context. So if you bear with me, I have it almost right now in front of me. 8 ways military leaders, sorry, that's building high performing teams. My mistake. Wrong one. But so it's basically how you can set yourself up for success. All right. Leading yourself through the morning. The morning time, military folks are so known for early mornings, right? We get up uber early. 5 a.m. is generally when I wake up. And then it's such a great time for you to be able to take advantage of. So I have what I refer to as 8 morning habits for leaders to achieve peak performance. And this is how we're going to lead ourselves. So I'll quickly go through them. This is all scientifically research backed. Okay. Habit number 1, avoid your phone. How many people listening, you wake up, the first thing you do is roll over and you grab your phone, probably even before you use the washroom, right? So that is a super mistake because what it does is it actually takes your brain from, it jumps its wake up cycle multiple steps. So you go from 0 basically to 100 without building up to it. And what that does is actually it enables your brain to jump into basically flight mode. So you end up becoming reactive, not proactive. And if you listen to my podcast, you'll hear so much about being proactive versus reactive. So that's habit number 1. Avoid your phone. Avoid it. Give yourself an hour. Get a cup of coffee. Maybe read. Relax. Anything but jumping on the screen. Habit number 2. This shouldn't be a shocker. Exercise. Okay. And no, I'm not talking about going to the gym and pumping the on. I mean, like, just simply go for a walk, maybe. Walking is such an underrated form of exercise. Maybe it's go for a run. But what the benefits is that it enables you to burn off steam potentially from the previous day, right? It sets you up. It gives your body positive endorphins. All right. So like yesterday, right now, I wasn't able to work out in the morning, so I worked out in the afternoon. And then by the end of my day, I was just like, oh, I do not want to go to the gym. And my deputy was like, come on, we got to go. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And by the time I finished the gym, I was like, oh, I feel so much better now, right? So you get those positive endorphins going.
I do dance for that.
Right. It doesn't matter, right?
And it's
It could be
intense, okay? It's
yeah.
intense. It's not just like hula hula. Well, not that hula is not intense. Intense. I'm just saying, it's just not just jumping around a little bit. It's quite intense. So yeah.
Oh,
Anyway,
I believe it.
go ahead.
I believe it. So habit number 3 is read. Okay. There's so many CEOs, so many great leaders out there. They'll read up to 52 books a year, maybe sometimes more. And what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a learning mindset right away. And it doesn't mean you have to sit there and read chapters upon chapters. Like, again, 15, 20 minutes, sit on the couch with a cup of coffee, all right, while avoiding your phone, and read an actual book. Habit 4, again, is eat a healthy breakfast. Like, how many people like skip breakfast on a daily basis only to go and grab something crappy from the canteen or cafeteria, maybe through a drive-through, right? It is actually going to set yourself up. Like, how many times as parents, the parents listening, like, oh, you got to have a healthy breakfast to your kids so that you can focus and pay attention to school today, so you're not hungry or you don't make poor decisions. Yet, meanwhile, the parent is just standing there with a cup of coffee in your hand, hasn't eaten a thing, and is about to go and head to the office, right? So having a healthy breakfast kickstarts your metabolism, helps you burn calories through the day, and it just helps you retain focus. Habit number 4 or 5, sorry, is journaling. I'll fully admit this one I suck at. I've attempted so many times. Again, not all habits are for everybody, so you pick and choose. Okay, but it can set the tone for the day. It enables you to put your thoughts down, your ideas down. Okay, and showed actually the study on this one showed that people became more efficient with their days after journaling. Okay. Number 6, we're almost there, is planning your day. So maybe you don't journal, but you can go ahead and plan your day. So now we're going back into that proactive mode. Okay. I have a meeting here. I have to do this. I have this task I need to check off. I'm going to do it from 10 to 11, what have you, right? But by planning your day, you're getting proactive, and that enables you to prioritize the things that are most important for your day. Okay. By being reactive. And this can be done in the morning. Some people prefer to do it at the end of the day for the next upcoming day. So again, it's flexibility. It's just some things that you have to consider. Uh, Habit number 7 is practice gratitude by looking at and being, practicing gratitude. Maybe that's simply writing down 3 things you're grateful for, 3 people. Okay. Again, that puts you in a positive mindset because there are so many negative thoughts, so many um, negative influences on us that can really drag us down. All right, that by practicing gratitude actually enables us to get in that positive mindset. It actually goes back to the same flaw of psychology of celebrating your wins. And then the final one from a great military leader, that is habit number 8: make your bed. And that may sound weird, but at the same time, if you think about the psychology of it, this is where we start our day. This is where we end our day. So if we come back and you're like, my day was garbage. Everything fell apart. If you come back and you got a nice made bed, at least you know that you're going to be able to sleep comfortably that night and then be prepared for the next day. It also enables you to go, hey, I got a win out of the gate right away because I got up and I made my bed first thing. Okay. So those are 8 habits. Again, it is avoiding a phone, exercising, reading, eating healthy breakfast, journaling, planning your day, practice gratitude, and making your bed. Um, this quick summary of this is it may sound like a lot because it is. Do you have to do all 8? God, no. Pick, choose what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Okay. Find the things that work, double down on those. Find the things, try something out. As I said, journaling just doesn't work for me. It's just not how I'm geared. Okay. I've tried it. I can put a hand on heart. It doesn't work for me. I've put it off to the side. Okay. And then what you do is you build your own morning routine around that enables you to be set up for success and lead yourself. You start the day by leading yourself, and then you come back to leading yourself at the end of the day.
Right. Yes. And as you said, you pick what's right for you. I mean, most people probably that I know would say meditation is their most important piece of the morning routine. And it's not necessarily in everybody's morning routine. And I love it too. And meditation could also look different for different people. There's different ways to do that. Then again, some people prefer appreciation to gratitude, right? And do appreciation. It has a slightly different connotation. And to some people it feels better because sometimes we also are in life situations where it's maybe a little hard right now to feel grateful. For some people, I'm not saying for me right now because I've practiced it enough, but if you haven't practiced it enough, sometimes you can maybe more easily find something you appreciate, and even if it's just your morning coffee, right? So, and then I think also another element to that I remember when I make my bed in the morning, which was one thing that I added myself after, a long time of not doing it, is actually the idea of finishing something.
Yes.
Right. And because that's what I personally have a hard time with. So I don't know if you're familiar with human design, maybe some of our listeners are. I'm an initiator, so I love to initiate stuff. It's also called a manifestor, for those listening. And I don't always love finishing things, and it's actually also not what I'm always supposed to do, but sometimes I am. And it's not the easiest thing for me to do. So in this little act of making my bed in the morning, I remind myself of this importance. That's my main thing in making my bed personally, right? And then, as you said, yes, it sounds like a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time because I have my kids in the morning, da da da. Maybe you find 10 minutes if it's not an hour,
That's it.
and that's already huge progress, right? So thank you for sharing this, Scott. Very rich insights, very rich content today. So thank you so much for being here. Now, just quickly, where can people find you? And then I'm, of course, going to list all your links.
Yeah, no, it's easy to find me. If you just go to my website, which is leaddon'tboss.com, you can find everything there from my blog articles like this one to my podcast episodes, how to work with me. I do one-to-one coaching, but probably a more successful, more popular program is my Leader Growth Mastermind, which is similar to a group coaching program, but kind of like how we started the conversation. There's actually no end to that program because leadership never ends; it continues, and so that group is there for the members always. Isn't like an 8-week program or a 12-week program, but rather a continuous program for the members. So you can check that out. My website, lead.boss.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here, Scott, with us today. Thank you to everyone listening. Now, before we sign off, I do want to quickly take a moment to talk about my new book, which those of you who are watching the video might be able to see in the background. It is called Living My Freaking Amazing Life, Create the Life That's Perfect for You Anywhere in the World. It is a leadership book, so pertinent to the topic and to the theme of this podcast, but it's not the typical leadership book. It's now available for pre-order on Amazon, and I wrote this book for you because I believe that you will gain value from the leadership insights that I gained from my very eclectic experiences on 5 continents. And as I like to say, I literally poured my heart into this book. I put out a lot of interesting information about my life that I wasn't at first sure to put whether I wanted to make it public, but I think it's really valuable. It's also pertinent to what Scott talked about earlier, self-leadership, because as I like to say, all leadership starts with self. So my leadership started with my own experiences and how I steered my ship across the oceans to the different continents. And I would love for you to also truly step into this freedom of steering your own ship and to this power of creating your most freaking amazing life as a leader and as a thriving leader, not just, as a leader of a team, community, organization, but also as a leader of your own life. And with that said, catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you liked this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.